Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
My guest today is Morag Lucey, Chief Marketing Officer at Avaya, who rejoined the company as CMO in 2015. Morag has also held top marketing positions with a variety of companies, including BAE Systems, Convergys, and SAP. She is a self-described enthusiastic seeker of action-packed adventures, so we're going to have an action-packed show today, which she does with her husband and two grown-up kids, and she is the winner of the CMO Club's Officers Award. Welcome, Morag. Nice to have you on the show and to be recording at Avaya's world headquarters.
Thank you. Great to be on the show, and I look forward to our chat.
The interesting thing that we've never covered on Renegade Thinkers Unite is how do you manage a brand when it goes into bankruptcy? And so let's talk about, because Avaya went into bankruptcy in January of 2017. Let's just talk a bit about what that means from a CMO's perspective.
Absolutely. And, we actually went into Chapter 11 to basically restructure our debt load. So for those of you that have been following the press, which there's been lots of it, we basically, had a burdensome debt load of over $6 billion, which to service that debt was becoming incredibly expensive. And so we had to basically look at that and say, okay, the optics of our business are really good. Our EBITDA is very high. Our discounts are good. If you look at all the different levels of our business, it's very positive. Our revenue has been declining, but our revenue makeup has been changing from CapEx to OpEx, and also the market is changing in terms of the way the types of applications and solutions that people are buying. So traditional UC, which we know as voice, has been declining fairly rapidly. And so, to go into Chapter 11 and file the restructuring is really a challenge for any company. But the key is to really manage the process in two areas. One is the communications, the internal communications, the communications to your customers, your partners, your suppliers, the your financial industry, and to manage it in a way that they understand exactly what you're going through, the ramifications of that, and it is incredibly timely. So it has to be orchestrated very quickly and efficiently.
So I realized that I forgot to ask you the what the heck is Avaya question, and this, of course, is for my Aunt Judy, otherwise known as the Taunt, who I know is a listener, and she'll want to know what's the simplest way of describing what Avaya does, and then we'll come back to the bankruptcy story.
Very simply, Avaya, we help companies ensure that they communicate with their customers and their employees in a way that is meeting the expectations of the customer's employees. So very simply, if you want to communicate with, let's use Amazon, you want to either do it, you could do it by voice, you could do it by text, you could do it by online, you could do it by chat. We enable all of the different channels of communication to ensure that you have contextual, which means that they know everything about you and they don't ask you for your phone number every time they move you around, which we all hate. But that it is efficient, fast, and always focused on you, the customer, or you, the employee. Today, most companies are really what we call single channel or a few channels, and they're not connected, which is why you have that issue that they don't know who you are, they don't know what you're doing, they don't know what you've bought, they don't know what you're looking at. Our solutions allow them to connect all that together so that your experience with the the vendor or the company is seamless, and which creates loyalty and a better outcome for the customer.
So here you are, and the decision was made to file Chapter 11, which most of the time does not sound like a message that you want to share. But you talked about sharing this and actually getting, as they say in PR, getting ahead of the story. So I'm fascinated about how you decided what that message should be and how do you communicate it?
Well, the message was fairly easy. I mean, being the number one leader in both what was call center, contact center to customer experience, which is what we just discussed, and in what's known as unified communication, which is sort of employee experience, so moving to collaboration, workflows, video, etc. We haven't lost our market position. We still are, number one with all of the, verticals, Fortune 100. So, it wasn't like we had a business problem. We are innovating very rapidly. Last year, we brought more innovation to market than we have ever done in the life of Avaya. And it is all software. It's all about application development. It's about microservices. And so the fact that the business model was robust, the innovation was robust, it's like the only issue was the debt. And so owning the narrative around that was very important. So that made it much easier for us to come out publicly and, really get ahead of the story.
I would imagine that if I'm an employee and my company files bankruptcy, there's a lot of fear. How do you, as a chief marketing officer, first of all, were you responsible for internal communications for this, which isn't always the case? How did you make sure that they felt secure and excited about the future of the company?
So yes, I'm responsible for communications, all communications. So we basically put a cross-functional communications team together, which included communications for all of our constituents, so customers, partners, suppliers, investors, internal. And then we met daily. And we wrote the narrative of, what was happening to us and why it was happening. And on the other side, we also balanced that with all of the positive that was happening. And so, we were continuing to, deliver great solutions to great companies. And so it is ensuring that everybody understands the process we're going through and understands the sort of output of that process. So at every point of the filing, we communicate, and we communicate in all ways. So we do it, we do it from the top. So our CEO holds all hands or does video communications, and that then comes down into, our internal comms in terms of our Avaya Currents, which is our internal site. We have a, weekly newsletter, but also all of our executive members hold monthly town halls. And so we're constantly talking about where we are and what we're doing. And, that was really important for internal. It was that openness, and it wasn't something that was happening in the executive suite.
I'm wondering if you, this is all pretty, I would call it straightforward and honest communication. Did you think about any kind of, I'm going to call it metaphor or narrative or something that, that like a story that was sort of could have an emotional connection with the internal target and like package it at all? Or was it really just about here's the facts and here's what's happening?
No, it was very much a story about the future. And it was, we took them on the sort of, you had to bring the past to the future. And so we really did like the narrative of sort of where have we been and where are we going. And so you have to talk about the fact that, in our lifetime, we've basically had, 5 different capital structures. And this, it's been 10 years since we went private. And so it was time for a new capital structure. But as you do that, and it is a process, you have to show them what the future looks like. And luckily, because of all the innovation that we were bringing to market and our real belief about, companies need to transform themselves to be able to meet the expectations of their customers. Every company is going through digital transformation, and it's communications is at the heart of that transformation. And, we are at the heart of the communications piece of that transformation. I think that's absolutely critical.
All right, so we focused a fair amount on the internal side of this thing, and I think there's probably a good place for us to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about how do you sort of get beyond the Chapter 11 message and keep your customers and your partners, because I know your partners are a really important part of this. How do you keep them excited? So stay tuned. Hang on. We'll be right back.
Renegade Thinkers Unite is brought to you by Social Media Explorer, the website that explores the world of social media from the inside out. Great advice from today's leading social media columnists and experts at socialmediaexplorer.com. That's socialmediaexplorer.com.
Okay, we're back. My guest is Morag Lucey, Chief Marketing Officer at Avaya, and we're really talking about a really challenging subject that not everybody has to go through, and probably you would say that that's a good thing for those others. But you're really you're optimistic and enthusiastic about this as a marketing challenge that is overcomable. Let's talk about how you turn the story externally, and how you keep your partners and because some cases, some of those partners may be some of the debt. How do we keep them excited and continuing to market Avaya?
So there was a number of things that we did. So on the day that we filed Chapter 11, we had a complete campaign go into market, and that was Avaya Strong. And, it was a campaign that, we really worked closely with our partners. A lot of one-on-one meetings with partners, with top customers, with, everybody that was connected to our ecosystem. But the key is really, it's the stories that we tell. And it is, the customers that, continue to rely on us to provide that experience that is, outstanding. And so being able to share daily those stories externally and internally really helped ensure that we were driving the momentum and the confidence that, this was not an execution issue. This was just a debt issue. We can still execute in terms of serving the market.
Interesting. So I love the simplicity of Avaya Strong. Obviously, that it at a moment when you might appear weak, this is certainly the counter programming to that. I imagine this took some planning if you did all these interviews. So you had some months before it was happening to prepare. But you can answer this question as part of this long-winded setup for this. But you mentioned story. Story has come up a lot on the show, and it's a subject that I am really passionate about and have studied intensely, and the hero's journey. And there's a lot of interpretations of what story really means. Let's talk about what story means to you and how you've brought that to life and brought Avaya Strong to life.
So for me, it is really about customers sharing what they are doing with the solutions. Technology is just technology. So it's the outcomes that technology delivers. The only way we can really share that is through the stories of our customers. I can tell you all day long how amazing our technology is and our innovation, but who cares? What you want to know is, what have people done with it and what have they seen? And so over the last, I would say 18 months, we have spent all that time getting the stories from our customers and really understanding what they're doing. We talk about the earthquakes, which is, a customer. It's the Avaya Stadium, but their story is all about fan engagement. It's all about how do they start to engage fans once they leave the stadium or when they're in the stadium. They have, a huge story around how they're using the technology to do that. And so for us, it's, customers tell it much better than we do. And so we have spent a lot of time capturing those and then delivering them in all different kinds of medium. So by podcast, by video, print, yes, it's on the website, but, you really have to capture the hearts and minds of people in the stories to be able to move the company forward.
I think hearts are really, and minds. And lots of brands talk about case histories essentially and stories as the same thing. And I distinguish between the two because I see great stories as having elements of conflict and surprise, right? And so, and typically, finding really good stories within the story is hard, and you need professional storytellers to do that. Have you been able to find, even if we could take the earthquakes as an example, sort of the emotional connection and sort of the really the heart of the thing where you go, oh gosh, that was so interesting?
Well, I think that there's an emotional connection in most stories. So if you get away from yes, we bought the technology and we wanted to do the following, most companies are wanting to connect with their customers. And, you look at something like the earthquakes and, they want to connect families. They want to make sure that the experience is seamless because they want the time that you're there to be focused on time with your family, time with enjoying the sport, that everything is just available at your fingertips. So whether you are wanting, to share stats on something or, you want to order something, you don't have to, it is in a way that, you're embodied in the whole experience. It's sort of hard to describe if you're not in that situation. But, there's absolutely an emotional connection to that. Whether you're an individual who loves soccer and just wants to, connect with the players, or whether you're a family who basically, has limited time and this is, 2 to 3 hours where, you are together uninterrupted, they need communications and that experience to be delivered in that setting.
I did watch a video that you all created that I thought was kind of interesting. It was, and I couldn't tell if it was current or more a vision of what the technology could do, but it was a father and her daughter, and there was sort of the identification part to make sure that the father was who he was at the soccer field at the school, and then they follow them sort of a day in the life, if you will, of this family. And there was sort of a kind of a touching element to it. There were a couple of things I noticed. One, you decided not to use a dialogue. And I thought that was really interesting choice, and I just was curious in terms of that whole. Is that video sort of encapsulating sort of the future story that you're looking to tell about Avaya?
No, that video encapsulates today. That's today. That's today. That's the world in which we live in. I mean, it's about all those communication touch points with all the different entities. It's a father who, he's got to go out of town, but before he goes out of town, he wants to take his daughter and spend time with her. And, so if you think about, everything throughout that day of what he has to do in terms of, communicate with the airline, communicate with the school. In today's world, unfortunately, you want to make sure that we understand who people are. So, connecting all of the different devices in the Internet of Things, that's all part of a communications workflow. And so to make sure that he is the father by either fingerprint or scan that's not the future. That is today. Being able to order something while you're sitting in your seat in the stadium and for them to deliver it to you. I mean, changing your airline seat, getting an upgrade. I thought it was a bit weird that he sort of looked confused about whether to take the upgrade or not, because it's like whoever looks confused about an upgrade. But it is absolutely today, and we've got hundreds of stories. We've got we do all the emergency services. So, whether it's 911 here in the US or whether it's in India or in Europe. And some of the stories are amazing. And emergency services aren't just voice. It's about text. If there's an accident, you don't have people like call anymore. It's like, well, I'll text or I'll put it on Twitter. And emergency services need to have all the different channels and be able to connect, with video so they can see what's happening. I mean, it's, I say that to our team here, and especially as you go through something difficult like, Chapter 11, what we do really matters. So it's not just, communications for companies to make big profits. It's really about the connection between people. And, creating a world in which we can have more time to spend doing the things we want to do while we seamlessly interact and communicate with all the things that we have to do because, it's mandatory in our life. We can't do without, banking and without utilities and, we want to be able to travel but we don't want to spend the afternoon doing those things anymore. We want to be able to do it as we move around.
Renegade Thinkers Unite is brought to you by Social Media Explorer, the website that explores the world of social media from the inside out. Great advice from today's leading social media columnists and experts at socialmediaexplorer.com. That's socialmediaexplorer.com.
I'm curious, in any of this along the way, there was one component that sort of came up unexpectedly or that you felt was sort of non-traditional, but you included it because it just helped tell the Avaya strong story.
That's actually a really difficult question in terms of sort of untraditional. In Avaya, I would say not untraditional. I mean, we're storytellers, so we're telling stories, absolutely, in Avaya. Now, in a different company, there was very one non-traditional way, and that was, if I can move from Avaya, was with BAE Systems. So for those of you that don't know, they're the big defense company in England, and moving into cybersecurity, which is all software and basically solutions. And one of the things that we did was we worked with McLaren Formula One, and we basically protected their IP because, of course, it's a very competitive sport and people want to know what they're doing to their cars. And so we were going to a big defense show, and they were like, okay, well, we can have a cyber security area for software. And it's like, okay, how do I compete with submarines and tanks and all these other things? So we came up with this great idea that we would take the Formula One car with McLaren and hang it upside down to the tank. And the reason we did it was that, trying to get people into a corner to talk about software and services when you're talking about, massive machinery is sort of difficult. So we did create a whole nerve room that looked like something out of, one of the, space age movies. Right. But having the car above the tank got people looking, going, why do you have a Formula One car above your tank? And at that point, then we started the dialogue about cybersecurity and how do you secure, your national infrastructure. And then we could take them into the nerve room and show them sort of what we were doing. But that was probably the most disruptive.
Last question is we've talked about brand transformation, sort of if you were to sort of say what the sort of 2 or 3 biggest lessons learned from this journey.
I think the biggest lesson is you communicate continuously with all your stakeholders and your customers, your salespeople, everyone internally. I mean, you have to constantly be working with them and talking with them. The customers are going to go on the journey with you, so make sure that they understand the transition you're going through and how they play a part in it. As we start to talk to line of business versus IT, how do we make sure that the IT people know how they make that transition? Because they are transitioning, the CIO's transitioning, the CMO's transitioning. So it's really showing them the path for how they can ensure that they are still valuable and, part of the transition. So, communicating and showing those journeys is incredibly important. The second one is, you got to be a risk taker. You've got to just do it and take a leap of faith with a number of things. And, as long as you've got your team behind you, and as long as your executive team is supportive, then, you're going to make some mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you're not taking risks. So, I would say everybody needs to do that. And the third is trust your team. Really empower them. Don't, limit them in their thinking. Let them loose, because, if you have a really solid team, they will make sure that, that transition is done in a way that is successful.
I think that even though we've been talking about how you deal with a crisis like bankruptcy in Chapter 11, I would argue that the lessons that the smart marketer, the renegade marketer, would say, you know what, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and in fact, maybe we need to make one in order to do the following. One was getting ahead of the narrative, controlling the narrative, as Morag talked about it. Every brand should be thinking about that. Number two was when you're in this crisis situation, you have to keep the message simple. And in order to do that, you identify the enemy. In this case, it was debt. And you say, that's the problem over there, not our business, not what we're doing. Really smart, but any brand could do that today without waiting for the crisis. Number three or four, depending on who's keeping account here, employee communications. Again, what it sounded to me like almost an over-communication with transparency and honesty, monthly meetings, not the sort of here's the big show and see ya in 6 months, but sort of open lines of communication, which I thought was really important. And then I think lastly was providing a real true vision for the future. I think every marketer needs to be thinking about that as the way they can, particularly a CMO, if they're not providing a vision for the future, then they're really focused on being a lead gatherer. And that, to me, is not what a CMO does. I mean, you need to be driving growth, and you're only going to do that by having your eyes on the future and imagining the future. Morag, it's been wonderful having you on the show. Thank you for creating another great episode of Renegade Thinkers Unite.
Thank you very much.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.